welcome to Talk episode 204. From wherever you're listening or watching, you're very welcome. A lot to get through again today. We obviously have the two Limerick Senior Hurling Championship semi-finals will take centre stage this weekend, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. We also have Premier Intermediate Hurling semi-finals. We had the junior quarter-finals already. We have some football action going on as well, and we'll be looking back on the ladies football finals over the weekend. And obviously, since we last spoke, Limerick have named their new football manager. So stay tuned for all that and more.
The impression of the game you get out with what you put into it's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the war court today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it high.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
Good afternoon, Matt. I suppose for anyone that was waiting to see us at half two, we had to be delayed now, or just things in life get in the way. But we're here now anyway, Matt. And how are you keeping? And how have you been over the last few days?
Sure, it has been hectic for the last couple of days, Jack. It's been hectic for the last couple of weeks because, of course, we've had so many games over so many codes, and of course, we're into the knockout stages, and we're up to the final stages in which the ladies' football now for this year is basically finished. Except, first of all, I suppose we should congratulate Mona Gay because they were the first club, Limerick club in club action in Munster this year, and they went to Kerry at the weekend and had a very, very good win over Dr. Crokes, 4-8 to 111. So that will prolong the ladies' football season in Limerick. But we had the junior and intermediate finals and big crowds at the weekend. The game is really, really catching on, and the only disappointment was, of course, and there's nothing anybody could do about it, and that's the weather. It was very, very disappointing in Cappamore, and Cappamore, as usual, had their facilities in ship shape. Absolutely. It's a lovely venue to visit, and but it was spoiled by the weather. But I know we'll be talking about the finals later, Jack.
Yeah, we'll get on to those finals later on the line. But you mentioned Sunday, and I suppose it was, the moment of the weekend and the stranglehold of the top four in the Limerick Senior Hurling Championship for the semi-finals came to an end, and it was South Liberties that inflicted that final blow that has been coming for a while, Matt. We have said that gap was closing, and 24 hours previously, KP nearly were the ones to do, but it was South Liberties in the end. A brilliant performance. You mentioned tough weather conditions. You can see by the scoreline, 113 to 14, that they were hard come by, but Brian Ryan got that all-important goal in the second half. And fair to South Liberties, they went into the break 3 down. They chipped away that lead in the second half, and once they got ahead, they never fell behind. Now, Patrickswell, to their credit, did draw level a couple of times, but a really, really exciting game. One that, very happy and privileged to be there to see that. And the scenes afterwards, is what kind of makes it, to show how much it means, because there has been a stranglehold at the top table in Limerick Senior Hurling, but to see a new team there is very good, Matt.
It is great, Jack, and in the early years of A and B, we got an excessive diet of the two teams that were qualifying for the quarterfinals out of Section B being thumped in the quarterfinals. And last year there seemed to be a sea change in that South Liberties ran Kilmallock so close last year that it went to extra time, and Adair ran Patrickswell so close. But we were still left to wonder, Jack, whether it was just one of those freak years. But thankfully, Jack, it wasn't. It wasn't. The gap has definitely closed. There's no question about it. Kildare Palace Kenry continued in last year's vein on Saturday, and then the breakthrough came on Sunday. And it's the first time in 6 years that the elite four, let's say, of the Piarsaigh, Kilmallock, Patrickswell, and Doon will not make up the semi-finals. So it's a major breakthrough, not just for South Liberties, but also for the clubs that are in Section B. It just points the way that there is a pathway to make progress. And there was no doubt, Jack, about the merit of South Liberties' win. They had to dig very deep. Of course, it was very, very difficult conditions, but it was difficult conditions for both sides. But they dug deep, as you rightly pointed out. There were 3 points behind at halftime, and it was one of those days, Jack, when a goal was going to be a huge score, and that is how it transpired. And the quality of the goal was first class from Brian Ryan. Come at the hour, come at the man in the right place, and he buried it in the Patrickswell net. And from there on, Patrickswell never regained the lead. Now they restored parity on a number of occasions, and one was feeling, here goes, Patrickswell are going to drive on, but no, it was Patrick's. It was South Liberties. Like we talk about leaders in sport, Jack, and it was a day when South Liberties had leaders all over the field. Anthony Nash in goal, Barry Nash, the Ryan brothers, Conor McSweeney, like especially when he went back in defence. Hey, they led from the front. Owen Godfrey, it was it was a proud day for South Liberties, and a day in which they deserved to make it to a first semi-final since 1985.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the big name players there, and they really stood up and led by example, and the rest followed suit then. But as you said, thoroughly deserving of their win. But you're going from the pit into the fire now, and you have the Piarsaigh next, the ultimate acid test in Limerick hurling. That game is this Saturday at 3:30 in Kilmallock. But for South Liberties, it's bonus territory now. A few will give them a chance against the Piarsaigh, but you heard Barry say after the game that they went in the game against Ballybrown, just hoping for the best and hoping that they could possibly get into quarterfinal. Now they're in a semi-final, and after the performance they showed last week, they'll have no fear playing the Piarsaigh.
No. And South Liberties are travelling to Kilmallock on Saturday, not to make up numbers. As you said, they're in bonus territory, and in many ways you could say it's possibly a free pass for them. But, I think they're going to give it a right good shot, Jack. I honestly do. Their tails are up now, and they have the advantage, Jack, and it's only a slight advantage, but they have the advantage of having a recent game under their belts, albeit it was only will only have been 6 days earlier. But the Piarsaigh have been essentially idle for practically a month, haven't they? So
yeah.
I think that will carry a certain bit of an advantage. But of course, when you talk about the Piarsaigh, Jack, you're talking about a star-studded cast that they have. Yeah, when you look down through the players, I was looking down through the panel and doing the preview this week, and by God, there's stars everywhere. They're falling out to you, and young players coming through, and I think the last day out, Jerome Byland was only named in the subs, and you fellas like him and David Breen in the subs, that type of thing, that type of power and experience, they're a very, very, very powerful outfit, and they seem to be absolutely determined this year to get back the title they last won in 2020, and they are going to make it extremely, extremely difficult for South Liberties. But as you said, it is the ultimate test, and it's the ultimate benchmarking that South Liberties can do. They will leave Kilmallock on Saturday evening, one way or another, win or lose, and they will know exactly the level they have to get to be at the top in Limerick hurling.
Yeah, and the Piarsaig's consistency is just incredible when you think about it. That it seems every second year they win the championship, and once they went back to back. And I suppose in a knockout championship game outside of Patrickswell in 19 and 21, they haven't been beaten by anyone since, was it Kilmallock in the 14 final? Once they get into the knockout stages, they're so hard to beat that if you were involved in the Liberties camp, how would you go about stopping the Card?
Well, they were beaten by Patrickswell last year in the semi-final.
Yeah, I know. I'd say outside of Patrickswell, who've beaten them twice, in a semi and a final.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
other teams can't seem to get the win over them in knockout games. That if you were involved, how would you set out your stall in trying to, I suppose, not only stop them but get the win on the other end?
Yes, it's not going to be easy, but the important thing will for South Liberties to maximise their chances, I think, are do what they have been doing in recent games and see where it takes them.
Yeah,
because if you're to be developing a strategy to curtail Peter Casey, if you're going to be a strategy to curtail Kevin Downs, if you're a strategy to contain William O'Donoghue, to pull Mike Casey out from the edge of the square, you're departing from what you've been doing for the last couple of weeks, and what you've been doing for the last couple of weeks has been successful.
Yeah, and I suppose one big thing I thought from South Liberties last day was brought huge intensity in the early part of the game, and also the entire second half. They're going to have to be in, I suppose, in the Piarsaig's faces and bring the game to them. But it's a free hit, and it's a really dangerous game for the Piarsaigh. You mentioned that layoff of a month, and we'll get to their footballers in a while who successfully navigated that. But you can't beat championship games at this time of the year realistically.
No. And of course, Jack, since the Piarsaigh last played, the grounds have got heavier, and the going is heavier. And come this time of the year, even if you have a dry spell, the grounds still tend to be heavy, because it takes so much trying to dry them out to the way they were, and we'll say when the ball was hopping in the summertime. So that in itself, Jack, it evens it up a bit, But you would have to say at this remove that it's a huge task for South Liberties, and they like it's a county semi-final, and county semi-finals normally bring pressure, but because of its because it's the Piarsaigh, they will come. Liberties will come under no pressure. I feel that they'll be prepared to give it a right go, 1 to 15, and see where it takes them.
Yeah, and I think that has to be the approach they take, to just not have any regrets and just take the game on its merits, give their best, and hope, like, if it goes well, they'll be in a county final, and if it doesn't, they've already ended a 37-year wait for a semi-final. So you'd imagine, for their point of view, it's job done already, and here is bonus territory.
Yeah. They probably would be disappointed, Jack, that that they haven't been promoted for next year.
Yeah.
It would give them an opportunity to be playing at that level. Would say for the entire group stage of the competition, but it is what it is. But whatever the outcome on Saturday, they will be buoyed up by it, and they're going to be a formidable force come the championship in 2023 in Section B.
Yeah, you already have them installed as favourites, even though we don't know who's going to be promoted. And obviously UVA are coming down, but they will be favourites for next year's championship. But for now, they'll certainly give it a rattle, and who knows? Like, not many would have tipped them against Patrickswell, but I suppose the Piarsaigh this year is another step up. Before we get into our semi-final, 24 hours before Liberties got through, we had KP and Doon, and for large periods of that game, Kilmallock and Patrickswell were ahead, or when they fell behind, they battled back. And I suppose first and foremost, their main objective was achieved when they got promoted. But they're a team that has given huge strides in recent years. Like, could you imagine 3 or 4 years ago they would have been disappointed to lose to Doon in a county senior quarter-final? It just deserves huge praise for that club doing it in both codes, and they pushed Doon all the way, in fairness.
They did, Jack, and as we said last week, it was an early opportunity for them to benchmark themselves against what they would be coming up against in the group stages next year. And by God, I'll tell you, if it was an audition for Section A hurling, they passed it with flying colours. You know, they really, really put it up to Doon, and you know, this game was won, Jack, in a 10-minute spell immediately after half-time. Kildimo Pallaskenry were a point up at half-time. They fell 7 points behind. And one was inclined to say to oneself, here goes. We're back to the same old story, the Section B team not making it in the quarterfinals. Jack, they dug in. And by the 59th minute, they had reduced the margin to a point. You know, and
they were doing a lot of the hurling, in fairness, at that stage.
At that stage, it was pretty nerve-wracking now for Doon. But credit Doon, they dug in and they dug it out. And but it was a huge test for Kildimo Pallaskenry, and like they will relish those type of tests on a regular basis next season. I know I might be jumping the gun, but you know, this is the type of progression that has been in Kildimo Pallaskenry, and we've been saying it for a long time. And 2017 intermediate champions, 2019 in Premier runners-up, 2020 Premier champions, 2021 first-year senior win the county cup, and here we are, 2022 get promotion. Kildimo Pallaskenry's next target is to break into the top 4. And you know, I don't think
it can be done, in fairness.
Too many sides will not be taking Kildimo Pallaskenry for granted next season.
Certainly not. But I suppose it is Doon that got through, and it was the team we expected to get through, and they're facing familiar opposition in Kilmallock. You know, we've seen these teams play against each other an awful lot in recent years. They obviously played out a draw just over a month ago in Kilmallock's final game. Obviously, Doon had the test against KP in the meantime, but really even game, I think, Matt. It's really hard to call a winner. Last year, Doon were flying it coming into the semi-final, and Kilmallock were probably in a low ebb. They were pushed all the way in the quarter-final by Liberties, and then they went out and blitzed Doon, and they pretty much blitzed Patrickswell in the final. So Doon will be looking for a role reversal, I suppose. We're focused on the east side first.
Yeah, like it's you know, it's a 50-50 game, and I think what happened that day in Fedimore when they played out a draw will have very, very little bearing on it, because there was a good few of the stars missing. For instance, on the Doon side, you had Barry Murphy missing, Adam English missing, Mikey O'Brien missing. In the Kilmallock side, you had Paddy O'Brien, Oisin O'Reilly, Michal Houlihan missing, and Shane O'Brien left the pitch after 5 minutes with a pretty looking serious injury. And so that robbed the game of a lot of the big names. But those that left and those that were out on the field between the white lines, Jack, they delivered a very, very interesting and a very entertaining game of hurling, and a very high quality game of hurling. And who will forget the wonderful goal that Pat Ryan got literally seconds after half time, or indeed the point he struck right from the right hand sideline for an equaliser right at the death. Like we plenty good scores in it. Doon will be boosted, Jack, by the fact that Mikey O'Brien started last week, and Adam English and Barry Murphy came on at half time. Adam English made an immediate impact. He scored 6 points. You know, he was busy. He performed in a way that it was like as if he had never been away. And that's a huge boost to Ty Hayes and his management team. That they can say, look, we've got game time into those three, and there'll be so much the better for it. Now, Kilmallock, of course, haven't been in action since that game, which is a long layoff, and there is no doubt that Doon, you must remember, Jack, if you were to get tested in a quarter final in preparation for a semi final, Doon got the ideal test from Kildare Patrickswell. You know, you couldn't have asked for a better test, and to put him in good fettle. Now, Kilmallock will have to worry about those injuries that of those four players. They missed the last game. Obviously, it's fair to say that some of them will have fully recovered. Will the entire four of them have recovered? I don't know. But what I do know is that it would be important that all four, because they've got to make up that little unquantifiable gap that we're talking about, and we've been talking about, and it's been spoken about year in, year out. The advantage of going the quarter-final route and getting the game under your belt. Kilmallock in a position now that they have to cope with that, and it is in contrast to the position that they were in last year when they had to come through the quarter-final route, and it's an incredible 11th semi-final in a row for Kilmallock, which is just simply mind-boggling. It'll give you an idea, and they've won 4 county titles in that period. It'll give you an idea of a sense of perhaps what Doon are up against. Now, there'll be a number of players in green on Sunday that will, they'll have 4 county senior hurling medals in their back pocket, and Doon will just have to take it one game at a time. They will just have to part the millstone around their neck that they've never won the Limerick County Championship. Yeah. They've just got to focus on getting over the next hurdle, which is Kilmallock in the semi-final on Sunday.
Yeah, I suppose that I was going to question you about that, but I think it's most important for whichever team can get off to the better start, because they're both well capable of leading from pillar to post. They've so many talented players, and you mentioned there some of the names that were absent for Kilmallock last day, and that's the benefit for Doon, that they've got minutes into Adam English, they've got minutes into Barry Murphy, into Mikey O'Brien, these boys that even if the likes of Oisin O'Reilly and Shane O'Brien and Micheál Hoolan are fit to play, are they match fit, and it could boil down to that, because realistically Adam English did turn that game almost single-handedly, and also Pat Cummins deserves a huge mention. 5 points from wing back, like for Doon, is fair scoring, but that it can't be overstated how important the quarter-final route is.
Yeah. Well, in this particular game, you're going to talk about very, very small margins that's going to decide it, Jack. No question about that. Doon's performance in the quarterfinal would not win a semi-final. No. It's a question of how much they will benefit from the quarterfinal. And my belief is considerably.
Yeah,
it may come down, Jack. Both sides have very, very exciting forward lines.
Yeah.
And it might come down to which defence will cope the best.
But similarly, I know that the defenders don't get the praise that forwards do, but they've brilliant defensive lines, equally good at both sides. But I will say for Doon, theirs is more attacking, which lends a hand, obviously. Josh Ryan, Rich English, and Pat Cummins, as I mentioned, all got on the score sheet last week. Probably won't see that from the Kilmallock half-back line, but will they be a bit more solid going backwards? It's so hard to call. I have the results here from the last few times, obviously.
Well, it'll depend on what the Kilmallock half-back line will be, because we're talking about Paddy O'Brien being a member of the Kilmallock half-back line. If Paddy is fit, it's probably going to be a very experienced half-back line in Paddy, Gavin O'Mahony, and Paddy O'Loughlin, all of whom, Jack, have scores in their locker.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt you on that.
No
But
doubt about it. No,
the-
if Paddy, I'm only trying to second guess Quentin O'Connor, Paul Tobin, and Owen Ryan at this stage. But if Paddy O'Brien isn't fit, they've Kevin O'Donnell. What a replacement, in fairness, and he certainly has scores in his locker.
yeah, I suppose it's an interesting contrast that the three you mentioned in the Kilmallock half-back line are all definitely capable of getting a score, but they're probably more ball players that they'll deliver it into the forwards, whereas Doon's is quite athletic and they like to get forward, which leaves gaps in defence. It's a risk and reward strategy. You probably won't see the Kilmallock boys leave their half. They'll, they have relied on their forwards this year, and their forwards are that good that they'll shoot the lights out, and they've been conceding very little at the other end. So, I mean, it's no surprise they played out a draw only a month ago. Last year, Kilmallock won in the semi-final. The previous year, Doon beat them in the semi-final. In 2019 group stage, it was a draw. Doon won the one before that. Kilmallock won the game before that. It's no team has been able to win back-to-back games, which is a good sign for Doon.
This one is on an iPad, and it's very interesting there that you mentioned getting back and I suppose reversing back, and you're talking about Paul becoming Richie English at centre back, like he's an inspiration, but he's two wingmen.
Yeah,
Patrick Cummins, but Patrick Cummins doesn't sacrifice defensive duties when he goes forward. He's the master of making the run at the right time and being in the right place, and he delivers it very, very quick. Now, Josh's approach is sheer power. Like, I think it's one of the most formidable sights in Limerick hurling or hurling anywhere. When Josh Ryan takes flight, there suddenly almost becomes a clear way in front of him, because he's such a powerful man. But but behind all that power and everything, he's a very, very, very good hurler, Jack.
Yeah,
Josh Ryan is a very, very good hurler and a very much an integral part of that Doon team.
Yeah, obviously we've seen him play for the senior footballers, but he was the free taker for Doon a couple of years ago as well. So I mean, he has shown his prowess with the small ball.
They were dicing with him for a few years in different positions, and Tyke seems to have found his home where he's very, very, very comfortable and very, very effective.
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't even mentioned midfield yet in this, which contains, all Ireland winners, Darragh Donovan and Robbie Hanley, and Aaron Costello could play there as well for Kilmallock. And then you have the likes of, Eddie Stokes was brilliant last day. You've Cormac Ryan, so much pedigree that could be in these midfield pairings. But I know that's about 10 minutes on that game. Look, it could be a case of one team hits the ground running, the other one can't match them, and we could have a fairly one-way traffic. Like last year, it was 420 to 216. Kilmallock laid out their stall early, and there was no come back for Doon. So we could see that, but I'd be expecting a close game in Bruff on Sunday. But I'll get your prediction later on in the pod.
Jack, in all the conversation, we haven't mentioned a certain Shane O'Brien, who is worthy of a lot of consideration, and certainly an awful lot of consideration by the Doon defence. If he's hopefully that he has recovered from that injury, and add to him Conor Hanley Clark. These two guys, like they are an absolute huge asset to Kilmallock, and like Shane O'Brien is one of those guys like that. You have no qualms about paying your admission money to win and see. He's really, really good, and let's hope, Jack. Let's hope that he makes it for. It would be a pity. They would be robbing. It would rob the semi-final of really one of the stars where he'd be missing, because like the form that he showed for Limerick minors and Limerick under-20s, and above all odds, Sculreach, he has translated that into the same form for Kilmallock. So like these guys are the guys you want to be watching, and we have an array of county stars and All Ireland medal winners, most of them with 4 All Ireland medals in their back pocket. Is hard to say it. If we were trying to say that 5 years ago, I suppose if we said that 5 years ago, that in 5 years' time that there'll be a lot of fellas walking around Limerick with 4 All Ireland medals, I think you'd be arrested. But it is what it is. But Shane O'Brien is up there with the stars.
Oh yeah, definitely. I suppose Doon do have the option that they could put Richie back there. Could be robbing Peter to play Paul, but Mikey O'Brien has played centre back there before. He's well capable. So I suppose if Shane starts and if they don't start it like that with Richie back there, they could always move an all-star in the corner back there. But it remains to be seen how things will be manoeuvred over the weekend. But it's just a fascinating time.
A very important member for Doon is Pat Ryan, and we seem to forget it now. He wasn't as effective as usual against Kildare Patrickswell. But his consistency is pretty second to none. In fairness, Jack, and he a big game from Pat Ryan will take Doon a long, long way.
Yeah, like a lot of these boys, that if they do have a quiet game, they come back in style the following game. And there's loads of other names that we haven't mentioned that you could go through. It's a real star-studded game, and I suppose for anyone watching, you'll see why Limerick are so dominant is when you have strong clubs like this. But moving into the Premier Intermediate ranks, Matt, we obviously are down to the final 4. I suppose it was disappointment for Glenrue. They lost to Drummond Lacka, which brought them level on points, and both missed out as a result. But the final 4, we have Monaleen topped the group ahead of Bruff, who also won, and Newcastle, who were big winners over Knockany, came in 3rd, and Monaleen, who beat Effin came in 4th, and they'll meet again this weekend. I suppose Monaleen and Effin this Sunday in Fenimore at 1 o'clock. Will last Saturday's game count for anything, do you think?
It will count for it will definitely count for something, Jack. It will, because in many ways, really, Jack, in this competition, there was very little back to the wall stuff until the final round, and clubs' backs were suddenly to the wall, and that included Monaleen, Jack. Because we went through the permutations here, as complex and all as they were last week. And there was a permutation that could see Monaleen excluded from the semi-finals. But by God, I'll tell you, they hit the ground running, and they've got a boost in the 2018 All-Ireland medal winner, Andrew Latouche Cosgrave, who hasn't played all year, made a cameo appearance in the last 15 or 20 minutes. Which would be a big boost, getting game time into a player of that caliber. And I saw Monaleen. I saw him against Knockany. It was a game that they were expected to win. I think that narrative got into their head because, they certainly did not hit the high spots that day. Went through the motions, but still had a good win. But then found themselves with in a situation where the vagaries of the final round could have seen them miss out. But by God, they put it to bed. It's a major disappointment for Effin, and I'm disappointed with Effin and for Effin that they find themselves in this situation. And it's far from ideal, Jack. It's far from ideal that you have clubs meeting in the final round and then again meeting 7-8 days later. It's not an ideal scenario. The nub of your question at the start, Jack, was will we see much improvement from Effin? The answer is yes. There's no it's not going to be a 14-point game or anything like that. I think the defeat and the manner of the defeat, it will galvanise Effin, and they have players in their squad who are capable of responding to this. Now, it'll be very, very difficult for them to turn it around, But they've got to park that and take it as a semi-final on its merits, and go into the game that way. Face it, as they really have to park what happened last Saturday.
Yeah, I suppose.
Take it. This is a new game. It's a semi-final. Give it everything over an hour. See where it takes us, and perhaps the unexpected might happen, and we might get to the final.
Yeah, I think everything are following in the lines of, we'll say, KP in their first year, Glenroe and Newcastle all reached the semi-final, but couldn't get over that barrier. They were in the top 4, but couldn't get over. They're trying to rectify that. And I will get your predictions for these 2 games in a while, but I suppose that's what Effin are trying to do, is to buck that trend, because it has become somewhat of a trend that the newly promoted intermediate champion finishes in the top 4, but can't get the semi-final job done. For Newcastle, then last year was their first year, reached the semi-final, were beaten by Cappamore. This year they're back in the semi-final. KP did that a few years ago. They got the semi-final their first year, a final the second year. That's what's within reach for Newcastle West. But they're playing a Bruff side who, will have been disappointed with last year, ended up in the relegation final. Bruff have always been thereabouts. They have a nice pedigree. They obviously won the under-19s Premier Minor final with a nice few of those players, involved as well. That it's it's building nicely, this one.
It is, and their meeting in the group stages was very, very interesting. It ended Newcastle West 19 points, Bruff 114. So that augurs very, 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 very well for Saturday. It's a game. This is going to be a very, very tight game, Jack. I suppose Bruff have more pedigree than any other club, perhaps, in the Premier Intermediate Championship. Now, they were the inaugural winners in 2014. They spent 3 years at senior level, and then immediately when they came back down, they qualified for the final in 2018, lost to Garrisballan, appeared in the semi-finals of 2019 and 2020, and failed to make the cut in 2021. So, they're certainly, they will see an opportunity, Jack, that this may possibly be their year, and an opportunity to definitely get to the final. I think the result in the earlier round of the group, in the group stages with Jack, would count for absolutely nothing. Yeah. Now, it's been a good year for Newcastle West by any benchmark. Now, they reached the semi-final last year, and look, all bets were off for the last 2 years because you had a truncated competition. But we were back to the real meaty business this year of 8 teams, 7 rounds. And, Newcastle West coped with that as well and got through. And, they got through comfortably in the finish, in that they finished on 9 points. They finished, I think it was in 4th, wasn't it? 3rd, Jack. Broke finished 2nd. This is a one that's going to be very, 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 very difficult to call. I prefer you wouldn't ask me to call these at all, but sure. I can see people going around there. You said we'd lose, and here we are. It's one of those ones,
they finished level on points after 7 games. I think that's all you need to say about it realistically, that it's going to be probably a puck of the ball between these teams, and it could go either way, and that's just the way these things go. But I suppose we'll come back to those later on in the podcast. Coming on to intermediate quarterfinals, so they're, we'll say, a week behind. You have Brewery versus Patrickswell this Sunday in Kilmallock at 1, and Croom versus Granagh Ballingarry on Saturday in Croke at 3:30. Suppose take them in a pairing. Which two would you see going through to the semi-finals with the Piarsaigh and Croke Kilfinney already waiting there?
These are repeats of last year's quarterfinals.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting, and if you ask me to say who do I think will go through, I would say definitely the same two that went through last year. I fancy Brewery to beat Palace Green. Palace Green only barely got into the quarter-final by the skin of their teeth with 4 points. Sorry, the quarter-final. Now Croom were dependent on a last day win to get into the quarter-final. And Granny Ballingarry and Brewery were beaten semi-finalists last year, and they will see this as an opportunity to get back there and possibly go one better. Granny Ballingarry, they've had a very, very interesting and impressive campaign. They lost the opening round, Jack, to Croke Kilfinney by a single point. And then they registered 4 straight wins. So now they're in a good place. Brewery won 3 of the 5 games. They lost to Fiohan initially and subsequently lost to Piarsaigh. So it would look to me, if you're asking me which one of the two has the better pedigree, or of the 4 that has the better pedigree, I would definitely say Granny Ballingarry would all day, because they've shown it through the group stages. If of course, knockout hurling takes on a totally different dynamic.
Yeah.
And if they can translate it to into the knockout stage, I go for Granny Ballingarry, Jack, and I go for Brewery.
Yeah, I suppose the only thing that will count against them is the Palace Green and Crew will be very determined to make up for last year. Losing to quarterfinal or any quarterfinal is very disappointing. But it's an interesting ties there, and obviously Granny Ballingarry are another team doing it at both codes. They're into the Junior A football final after winning the Junior B last year. And talking about teams doing it at both codes, Broadford are into the semi-final of the Junior A hurling. St. Kieran's completed the lineup last night. We don't have the semi-final pairings last night or as of yet, but we have St. Kieran's, Broadford, Killeedy, and the other team escapes my thoughts, but I'm sure you will fill me.
Sorry. Name the 3 again. You have
Patrickswell. Patrickswell were the first one in there. Patrickswell, Kieran,
Patrickswell, Broadford, St. Kieran's, and Killeedy.
We don't have the quarter-final pairings as of yet, but obviously Patrickswell left it very late to beat Doon. Late goal
66-minute Josh Carey goal.
Yeah, Broadford probably a bit more impressive against Castletown Ballygrand, 23-212. Killeedy beat Cricora. That went all the way, every bit of all the way. Penalties 5-4, which is really disappointing for Cricora in their first knockout game in a long time. But Killeedy got through, and then last night St. Kieran's 116, the 10-point winners over Kilteely Drumkeen. We had kind of signalled out St. Kieran's after winning all their group games and getting to a final last year. They just appear to have had the most comfortable quarter-final. Now, we don't know the semi-final draw as of yet, but St. Kieran's just seem to be the team to beat at the moment. I think it's fair to say.
I think it's fair to say. I think so. I fancied them to win the final last year against Caroline. Now they came up short on the day. It was a fine performance by Caroline actually on the day. And unfortunately for Caroline, their state intermediate level has been all too short because they were relegated last weekend following defeat by Kilmallock in the relegation final. I fancy St. Kieran's. They haven't gone away, Jack. They just haven't gone away. And, in the run into the hurling now, they were juggling between hurling and football all through the summer. And they were one of those clubs that were involved, prolonged involvement in both codes. So football now is out of the way. Not that they wanted it to be out of the way, but it is. And all the focus is now, all the eggs are in the one basket and they're in the hurling basket. So I fancy St. Kieran's certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had said that the winner of Killeedy and Cricora would have been my shout to cause an upset. So I suppose I'm in the Killeedy boat there. But any team from here can definitely go on to win the championship, like we saw with Caroline. And I suppose it is a big disappointment for Caroline that they will be back in the junior ranks next year. But I mentioned Drumbrodford doing it in both codes. They obviously have a semi-final this weekend against St. Senans in the intermediate football final or semi-final. We know one of the finalists, Matt. It was the Piarsaigh beat Mungret St. Paul's 3-12 to 3-10. To be fair, we had both gone for Mungret, probably on the basis that the Piarsaigh hadn't played since the end of August. And for a lot of the game, it looked like it was going to be Mungret's. They went 5 or 6 points clear at one stage, but the Piarsaigh rattled off 1, 4, 5 in a row and got to win. And they're another team that are looking to bounce straight back, and they're one game away from doing it.
They are absolutely, and I think we both fancied them from the outset, because I felt that they were unlucky to lose senior status last year, and but I thought that their preparation for the semi-final, through no fault of their own, Jack, and which is a far bigger issue, that has to be addressed, and not addressing it is not an option. That they hadn't a game since the 26th of August, and they had only 3 games in the group phase of the competition. It was far from they got 2 walkovers. It was far from ideal preparation, but they rose to it, Jack. And they come the final in a couple of weeks' time. They will be far more formidable now that they've got that real competitive game under their belts. So our hunch at the start of the year that the Piarsaigh would be there or thereabouts, it has come to pass already. But they're going to face formidable opposition, Jack.
Yep.
This weekend we have the meeting of Drumbrodford and St. Senans. Now, Drumbrodford were beaten in the quarter-final last year. I was out at it. They were beaten not so much on the scoreline, Jack, because in typical Drumbrodford style, they hung in there. But on the pitch and in terms of possession against Rathkeil, they were comprehensively beaten. But they've moved on this year, and they've had a great group stages. Insofar as that they won 4 out of their 5 games. The only team to beat them was Rathkeil, and Rathkeil didn't qualify at all. So, but they had some very, very good wins along the way over Mungret St. Paul's and over Gerald Griffins and all that sort of thing. Real good wins, and they're a formidable outfit. But so too are St. Senans. St. Senans were beaten in the semi-final last year, and is this their 3rd year back at Premier Intermediate level, having been senior for a couple of years? 17, 18, 19. Yeah, it's their 3rd year back, and they're chomping at the bit to get back into senior ranks. Their only defeat in the group stages was at the Piarsaigh by a narrow defeat by the Piarsaigh in the opening round. And they've been very, very impressive since, and of course they navigated their quarter-final with Gerald Griffins, which was a tricky assignment, and just got over the line. And it'll be a very, very interesting game with Drum, and I have a hunch that St. Senans just might end Drum's good run, but it's a very, very hazardous and risky thing to be doing, to be predicting against Drumbrodford.
Yeah, that's the kind of line I'd be taking. It's a fool's game to be backing against Drumbrodford, but I thought Griffins would come through their quarter-final with Senans. So obviously Senans have a good pedigree. So, that one could go either way. 3 o'clock in Newcastle this weekend, this Sunday. But moving on to ladies football then, Matt, and you were out in Cappamore the weekend, and you mentioned the weather conditions, but I suppose starting with the junior final, you couldn't have imagined to be able to put in a performance like Celtic Gales did in those conditions. I mean, it was just flawless football. I suppose a hand run the other end of it, but you couldn't say anything at fault for a hand. Celtic Gales were just brilliant from start to finish.
Yeah, but they've been that way all through the year, Jack. And I think the writing was on the wall right from the start of the championship campaign that it was Galtee Gaels to lose. They entered into the intermediate league and won it, and they're really, really exciting. And their first half performance, Jack, what I likened it to was Limerick's first half performance in the 2020 All-Ireland final. Because you remember that day that Limerick scored a phenomenal 3 goals and 18 points. Galtee Gaels scored 3-10 in the first half. In those conditions, like it was irresistible football. It was just simply fantastic. They had a forward line, that they clicked. Roisin Breedy, who's player of the match, Leah Geary at full forward, absolutely fantastic. Breda Martin, right back along the field, right back to fullback Shelley Fitzgerald. Shelley Walsh, who was the captain, right through the lines. They were fantastic. Now, Ahane made a go of it in the second half. But I think Johnny Cleary, the Galtee Gaels manager, probably had a job of work to do at half time to get his girls to go out and deliver more of the same, because at 3-10 to 1-2 at half time they had delivered victory, you could say. But within seconds of the restart, Niamh Brennan got a goal for Ahane.
Yeah.
And one sensed very briefly that it heralded a comeback, but it didn't. Right at the other end, Galtee Gaels added 1-3, including Roisin Breedy getting a great goal, her third of the game, and it was from a very, very acute angle, but she buried it in the corner of the net no element whatsoever of fluke in it, Jack. She teed it up and slotted it into the corner, and that was game, set, and match. Though in scoring terms, Ahane won the second half. They scored 1-4, I think, to the Gaels 1-3. But
The gig was up.
I'm sure Galtee Gaels tested in the second half that they would have responded. Jack, I'll be surprised if they'll be one bit out of place when it comes to the intermediate championship next year. I think they're entitled to look forward to it with relish. And, it completed a great 24 hours for the Gaels, because on Saturday they won the novice final. They beat All Mill. So that will give you an idea of the depth of the squad that they have. Like they're up to 30 players. Actually, they're 34 players in Capamore last Sunday. And with the exception of a few, they're all drawn from their own parish, like the male counterparts.
Yeah, no, it was great work being done.
It'll give you an idea of what football means in the parish. If you were there last Sunday, like every one of the senior football team, almost to a man, were there shouting them on. It was huge.
Good to see. And I suppose it was good to see Galtee Gaels get that win, and also for Ula, after the disappointment of last year, to finally get over the line. They beat Knockany, a pair of Amy Ryan goals, probably the difference in the end. And, it continues that trend, Matt, of teams getting to a final and being beaten and coming back the following year. And Ula were no different on Sunday.
No different on Sunday, and they fully deserved their win. And, of course, those sides had met earlier in the competition, the first round, and Ula had won 6-16 to 1-6. But by God, I'll tell you, Knockany made a game of it, Jack. In the first half, it ended. Now conditions were deteriorating as the game was going on. Because it was the second game, and it was nip and tuck in the first half, very, very, very close. No sugarcoating it. It wasn't good football. But they were mitigating circumstances because greasy ball, greasy underfoot conditions, what have you. But in the second half, in a 4-minute spell, the game turned on its head with those 2 goals. The first I thought was simply excellent individual effort. Amy was out on the left. She crossed the goal, trying to get an opportunity. Eventually saw the spot, pulled the trigger, and that wasn't the hope that Lily O'Donnell in the Knockany goal could have done anything about it. Now the second was a very good goal as well, and it was applying the finish to what was a good move, but it effectively put the game practically out of Knockany's reach, because you had the experience of Doon clicking in there and at that stage, and like if you went down the lines, you had Siobhan Maloney at full back, who was immense, and then you had Leah Coughlin at midfield, who played a huge part. And up front, of course, there was Amy Ryan, but one player who really caught the eye, I thought anyway, was Lainey Stokes.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
She ended up with 3 points from play, and she was simply magnificent. She's just a bundle of energy, and a workaholic, and a really exciting, good player now. So you Kathleen Fitzgibbon in the halfback then used to play with Limerick. So you had they had the names all over the pitch, and when it came to closing out the game, and I think once the 2 goals went in, Jack, at no stage did I see Ula in any imminent danger of being overtaken. It was that kind of a game, and you had Karen O'Dwyer in goal, who has experience of playing with Limerick. So they headed right down the lines. Now Kenny did stage a bit of a recovery, and it was led by 2018 All-Ireland medal winner Eva Hartigan. She first of all, she got a free, and she put it over the bar, and a couple of minutes later, a minute or 2 later, they were awarded a free. I think it was Quiva McNamara, I think possibly that took a quick free, spotted Eva Hartigan in an advanced position. She gave Cameron Dwyer no chance. It reignited Knockany hopes, but it was a very youthful Knockany side, and I think we flagged that last week. And when push came to shove at the end of the day, it was experience against youth, and invariably in those type of situations, it's experience wins out. But there can be no doubt about the merit that Ula deserved to win the intermediate championship, not just this year, but since they've been promoted in was it back in 2016, I think. They have been dicing with making the breakthrough since, and they have Richard Bowles and his management team have done an excellent job with him. They have been through to the semi-final, I think, every year, and through to the final last year. And so I suppose that day in the sun, albeit it was heavy rain, it eventually came, and they got over the line. And they're seeing a football to look forward to now. And I'm just wondering, Jack, I've just been thinking since and reflecting since. There were 7 teams in the Senior Football Championship this year. Will they become the 8th? Which would be...
I don't know. I don't know will they become the 8th, but certainly they won't be out of place. Like Galty won't be in intermediate. Ula will be the same in senior. And we saw Drum make that successful transition, so Ula will be looking to follow suit next year. But big congratulations to Ula and Galty Gales on winning those titles at the weekend. We'll have 2 more titles decided this weekend, this Saturday and Sunday, in the Camogie Championships. We have the junior and intermediate. We'll start with the junior, Matt. Blackrock Effin versus Galbally. That promises to be a tasty affair between near neighbours.
Yeah, very tasty affair in Martinstown on Saturday at 3 o'clock, Jack. And you've Galbally. Galbally are looking to go one better than last year, Jack. They were beaten in the semi-final, and they put up a very good show against a very good Adair team in the final last year. And it's indicative of maybe where they are at. that they troubled Adair for a long time, that Adair are now through to the intermediate final. So they were up against a very good side. Now they will be coming back, hoping to go one better. But standing in their way are Effin and Blackrock. This is a combination that came together as a merger of the respective clubs in 2015, and I'll tell you, it has been some rise through the ranks for Blackrock Effin. They only fielded an adult team for the first time in 2019, and that year they won the Junior B Championship and were promoted. And they have won the Junior Plate and have been runners up in the Junior Plate since. So, like we were talking about the progression of Kildalma Palace Kinry, we're looking at a similar progression here. And all right, it's going to be their first time in the final, and obviously they're going to relish it. And it's a game that can go either way, Jack. I wouldn't dare put my head in the block and say who'll come out on top.
Yeah, I won't ask you so if you won't, but I will. I suppose probably ask you more for the intermediate between Adair and Crokilfinney. Obviously, Adair were junior champions last year. Near neighbours going against each other. It promised to be an intriguing contest, but I suppose even though Adair were junior last year, they have shown the pedigree and they have the players to make that step up to senior in only 2 years. But Croke have been there for a while, and I think we're beaten in the semi-final last year, so they'll be looking to go 2 steps better. I'll ask you to call this one, or where do you think the game will be won and lost?
Yeah, I think there's an element of momentum with Adair. I saw him playing junior last year. I was hugely impressed with him. When it comes to at this level, Jack, big players are seriously big, and for Adair, they don't come much bigger than an all-star nominee in Cueva Costello.
Yeah.
Sophie O'Callaghan, who captains the team, is also immense. And then you have Aisling Connolly, a 2 times all-star inside in the full forward line. Good spread, centre back, centre forward, corner forward. Top class players. Then you have Grace McNamara, who's quite experienced as well and doubles up as chairperson of Limerick Camogie. I think they have the big names, and I think they have the power. Now, Brian Sexton of the Sexton Clan and Brewery is the manager of Crokilfinney, and obviously has done a very good job with him to bring him to the threshold of senior hurling or senior camogie for next year. They will be depending on the like of Orla Kelleher, who is a very good player, with very good player, a very promising player with Limerick. But looking at it overall, Jack, was impressed with Adair, jury, and I think we flagged at the outset when we were previewing the Camogie Championship about the possibility of Adair being in the situation that they're in now. And I think the biggest scalp of all for Adair, they beat last year's semi-finalist, Mona Lean, in the semi-final. Last year's finalist and runners-up, Mona Lean in the semi-final. That was a huge scalp. Jack, I'm going for Adair.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Just as you said, the player power they have, an all-star nominee can make a telling difference at that level, and I'd expect Adair to come through that one. Last week, Matt, we recorded on Wednesday, so we were 48 hours before the news that the Limerick senior footballers have a new manager. That man is Ray Dempsey from Mayo. Managed his own native Knockmore to successive county titles, has managed underage in Mayo, but I suppose the biggest positive to come from it is that he was the leading contender for the Mayo job. Mayo obviously are perennial All-Ireland contenders, so I mean, if he was in the reckoning for that job, you'll be really hopeful as a Limerick football fan that he can continue the great work that Billy Lee did for the last 6-7 years. And he brings him a huge pedigree, and we don't know his background team yet, but a really exciting appointment for Limerick, no doubt.
Yeah, it is an exciting appointment, and I had a call from somebody during the week who was waxing lyrical about his qualities, and he was waxing lyrical that that we had kind of pulled one when he was appointed, because, as you rightly say, he was right in the thick of it for the Mayo job. Now, he's a former Mayo footballer. He had a pretty decent career with Mayo. Now, as well as managing not more to successive county titles in the last couple of years, he has been manager of this is my information. He has been manager of Mayo minor and under 20 teams without success, but he came with the caveat that he just didn't have the quality or the players at the time, but that he left his fingerprints on them, in that a lot of them improved and went on to greater things. So, what we got to do is wish him the very, very best of luck. It'll be interesting to see who will be coming on board as his management team. That will be an important factor, of course. And what I would believe, and not telling him what his management team should be, but I think it would be very, very important that there would be a local input, a Limerick input into it. So now there were rumours to the effect that I think in his package for Mayo he had included Oisin McConville of Armagh, but he has since been appointed manager of Wicklow, so that's a non-runner anyway. So I think his management team, those he'll surround himself with, will be very, very important. And as I said, very, very important that he should that there should be a local element in it, local content in the management team.
Yeah, you mentioned Oisin McConville there. It would be easy to say that he'll transfer over the management packet that he was going to bring to Mayo, but logistically, a share of those people were from Mayo. They might want to make the journey to Limerick, and to fair to Ray, I'm very sure he lives in Mayo, so it's he's given up a lot of time to take on this role. But as I said, first and foremost, it's very exciting. I'm sure he'll get the right people in place, and it would be good, I suppose, to have a Limerick voice inside there that has seen the club championship, because it is coming to an end. We have the semi-finals next week, and the final is, I think, scheduled for the 6th of November. So the best of luck to Ray anyway. I suppose it isn't too long before we'll see Limerick in McGrath Cup action, but until then, I suppose the best of luck to him and whoever he has in his management team, and hopefully that the players, appropriate players, will present themselves, and that Limerick can continue the good work that Billy Lee has been putting in for the Billy Lee and the players and management team have been putting in over the last 6-7 years. But yeah, the best of luck to Ray. Before we finish, Matt, we'll go into our predictions as always.
Just before you go there now, I just something that has struck me during the week, and it's these county cups, Jack. Now the county senior hurling cup is on Sunday, I think, between Mungret St. Paul's and Ballybrown.
Yeah,
but the intermediate cup this year has been nothing short of a farce. And, I think it's past the time to end the charade. The 4 clubs that were qualified were Maru Boher, Fiohana, Hospital Herbertstown, and Knockaderry. Now, we had Maru Boher and Fiohana pulling out of the semi-finals, and we have Hospital Herbertstown giving a walkover in the final. That is no value. Knockaderry are county intermediate cup champions for 2022 without pucking a ball in anger. What is the merit of that competition?
I don't know.
None whatsoever. I think the county cup, whilst the concept is good, Jack, that it should be a good consolation prize. But unfortunately, the clubs are not seeing it that way. They have a totally different perception of it. As one said to me, sure, look, it's only reminding us that we're out of the championship, out of the big one.
I
So
suppose for
their
different clubs.
future, Jack, has to be thrown into doubt. And we already have a very, very clogged season. And maybe it's time that the county cups get off the pitch. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the county cups there. Obviously, you'd like to hear, I suppose, the opinions of the Ballybrown and Munger St. Paul's players. Are they happy to have another game, or would they have been as happy to end the season when it did? Look at Gareth Spillane, whose season just came to an end. Would they have liked to be involved? Similarly, Ahan, who avoided relegation. I presume they wouldn't have minded another game if you had semi-finals maybe in that. From my personal point of view, I know, like for Ballysteen, we missed out on the quarterfinals. We finished fourth in our group. Sure, the lads wouldn't have minded another game maybe for a cup. I know it isn't the one you set out to win at the start of the year, but for some teams, any sort of silverware would be very welcome. So I suppose the condensed nature of the season probably makes it a bit harder, but it's an interesting one. But certainly discredits the integrity of a competition if there's walkovers and no actual final played. But it is important that you address that there, So hopefully, maybe there's a decision made on, trying to improve the integrity of it, or just calling quits with competition with the nature of the condensed season.
Jack, there's considerable difference between me talking about it and the powers that be talking about it. The ultimate decision rests with them, and I can only describe it as somewhere between a charade and a farce. I don't know what you'd call the middle ground, but a competition like that. Okay, the senior one is going to take place, and actually, the senior county cup last year was a very interesting game, and I was there with you, Jack, at it between Gareth Spillane and Kilmallock.
Yeah.
Full credit to the two teams. They gave it everything, and probably Ballybrown and Mungret will give it everything come Sunday. But down at intermediate level, the intermediate clubs seem to have totally disengaged with the county cup, and they've fallen out with the competition, obviously. And the whole concept of the county cup needs to be revisited and looked at. And if you haven't a meaningful competition that clubs want to be part of, you're actually going nowhere.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and hopefully one that'll be rectified going forward. I suppose best luck to Ballybrown and Munger St. Paul's this weekend. As you rightly said, it was a brilliant game last year, so hopefully more of the same. But it probably won't be able to get there with the senior semi-finals on. But to round out the pod, as we always do, Matt, we'll go into our predictions, just 4 games this week. We'll look at last week's results. We both went the same way in all the games, bar one that I called a draw. It didn't come to fruition. You're still that 1 point ahead, both at Doon, Newcastle and Brough. We both at Patrickswell that were defeated. Both at Glenroe that were defeated. And then you had Effin and I had a Monaleen and Effin draw. So that's the state of play as we get to the business end of the predictions, Matt. But I'll start with one of the big ones. Or I'll start, I suppose. We'll start with Premier Intermediate and we'll go with Monaleen versus Effin. Obviously, Effin were big winners when they played only 8 days ago, and you alluded to that fact that it will have an impact. How much of an impact will it have, do you think?
I'm going with Monaleen by 5.
Monaleen by 5. Do you know what? I'm going to go with Effin to turn the tide. I just like to go against you sometimes, but I think they might break that hoodoo of getting back up. We had singled them out earlier on the year, both of these teams, Monaleen and Effin. So, I mean, it's a hard one to call. Monaleen will be favourites. There's no doubt about that. And then Newcastle West versus Brough.
Brough by 3.
Brough by 3. One of the teams that actually came in for us last week with their win. I'm going to go Brough as well, narrowly by 2 points to beat Newcastle. But it's a toss of a coin, that one. That would leave, for you, a Brough Monaleen final. For me, a Brough Effin final. But on into the senior championship then. Doon versus Kilmallock.
Kilmallock by 2.
Kilmallock by 2. you know what? I said at the start of the year I had a feeling about Doon. I don't think they've played to the level that I thought they would play this year, but I'm gonna stick with Doon to win by 2 points and avenge that defeat from last year's semi-final. And then the Piarsaigh against South Liberties.
The Piarsaigh by 5.
The Piarsaigh by 5. I'm gonna go on the Piarsaigh by 6. I think last week was the big game for South Liberties. You know, we've alluded to that earlier on the podcast. Very difficult going against the Piarsaigh. They have been the standard bearers in the competition for so long. That would leave for you in the Piarsaigh Kilmallock final, for me, the Piarsaigh Doon if they're to come through. So we will have differences in whatever final we think is going to happen. But I suppose cracking games to look forward to, Matt. If you were to single out one game as the game of the weekend from those 4.
Well, all due respects to the other 6, it has to be Doon and Kilmallock.
Yeah, we spent, I suppose, a good nearly 15 minutes discussing that game. And no surprise, there's no surprise really with you consider the players in action there. You know, it's just mouthwatering. The amount of All-Ireland medals that will be taken to the field in Bruff this Sunday is something to behold. Probably a Limerick senior game has never had as many medals on one field at one moment.
They'd make about 10 medal chains.
Yeah, at least. But before we finish, Matt, obviously it's all GA with us. But stepping away from GA for a minute, last night the Irish women's national team qualified for the World Cup. And I suppose they're a team that have kind of touched the nation in general. I couldn't claim to be a huge soccer fan in general, but it was lovely to see the scenes over in Hampden Park. And, you know, nice to have an Irish team to look forward to in the World Cup next year in New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to see it because I was away at a couple of funerals last night. Unfortunately, we have to bury the dead as well, Jack. God rest them. But
yeah,
I didn't see it. But certainly the significance of the victory and qualifying for the first ever World Cup hasn't been lost on me. And like the whole nation is in. It's in celebration, I suppose, tempered celebration this week. Because, I suppose, the sad events of last Friday in Creaslough, I think they overshadow everything, and they put everything into context. And I suppose there was a bit of irony in it that the winning strike was by a girl from Donegal. It's a county that needs a lift at the moment. Very, very, very sad days in Donegal, but and indeed in Ireland, as we all share their unspeakable grief. It's fantastic. Any time that you come through a group stage and qualify and had to actually go through a playoff series to qualify is a good day. Any day you qualify for a World Tournaments final or World Tournament finals, it's just simply fantastic, and well done to the girls, and the best of luck to the girls. And I suppose it has been something in a way that has been coming. They have been building and building and building, and now they're there, and let's hope they give a good account of themselves, which I'm pretty sure they will.
Yeah, that's the main goal there. And just echo your sentiments there from that tragedy in Donegal. It's very difficult for all the families, and a lot of us are from rural parishes and can only try to relate to what happened up there, and it's just terrible. But it was fitting in a way that, as you said, a girl from Donegal got that crucial goal. So our condolences out to everyone affected by that tragedy in Creaslough, and congratulations to the Irish women's national team. I suppose that'll bring an end to the podcast. There's flashing lights behind you, Matt. I don't know, is that just on the screen or what's gone there? But we've 80 minutes on the clock there. It's plenty Limerick GAA action for any week. Obviously, the Senior Hurling Championship semi-finals are the standouts. We also have Premier Intermediate semi-finals, junior or intermediate hurling quarter-finals. We have an intermediate football semi-final and a junior football semi-final. So loads of action, Camogie as well. So a huge thank you to you, Matt, as always. And a huge thank you to everyone that tuned in. Stay safe and have a good weekend.
Thanks, Jack.
Especially in the game, you get out with what you put into it. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Johnny Buckley. To do that to Tomás O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word court today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left?